Yo, what is going on? And welcome into week 8 start sit. Let's go. We are at the midway point of the fantasy football season. It is right smack dab in the middle of the year. Week 14 playoffs are the target, and I hope that you are dominating in all of your leagues. Hope you're sitting at nice 5-2, 6-1. Hey, I got some good 4-3 teams I feel great about. Let's have a great week 8, and let's go through all of the information that you need to dominate this week. As always, we're going to be using Fantasy Points projections. Chris Wecht, our projection czar, has done a phenomenal job this season running projections. They are led by him and obviously our team of analysts. We spend every waking hour, Wednesday through up until kickoff, to get these projections as tight as possible. So make sure they are the kind of the end point for all of your final calls in your leagues. As always, I write a free article every single week on fantasypoints.com to kind of give some color to the projections. So make sure you're checking that out. And as always, let's get started with some quarterbacks. Obviously, we have no teams out on bye, right? We got all 32 this week. Really deep quarterback pool, which is nice. Obviously, Lamar, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, Joe Burrow, those 5 are your must starts. And then from there, we have kind of like, a really long, maybe 12, 13 player tier of decent low-end quarterback ones that are all in play, ranging from, Caleb Williams, who I'm very into this week. Williams has been kind of guy I'm buying low a little bit this week. In 3 of his last 4 outings before the bye, he finishes a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And it's not just empty calorie stuff. Like, he's playing significantly better after a really bad start. Last 4 games, completing 70% of his passes for nearly 263 passing yards per game at nearly 8 yards per pass attempt. He's got 9 touchdowns, 3 picks, taking a little bit fewer sacks, scrambling a little bit more. He's got 4 carries in 5 of his last 6 starts. Obviously, he doesn't get the design carries like we see from Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, but that little bit of scrambling does help in fantasy football. And yeah, this is a good spot, man. I think Washington is gettable. They're playing more too high safety coverage to kind of keep everything in front of them, keep their corners away from being on islands because they're just not good enough to keep up with DJ Moore and Romeo Doubs and Keenan Allen. Still, Washington is giving up the second most passing fantasy points per dropback. Only Carolina is worse. So, I'm still buying that this is a really good spot for quarterback production. Wish we had Jayden Daniels on the other side, but it looks like he's going to miss this game with a rib injury. This game would have been awesome for fantasy if Jayden were in, but it's going to be Marcus Mariota. But still, I like Caleb Williams, and I'm buying, like I said, I'm buying low on Bears going forward. The rest of season schedule is pretty nice, and Williams is playing better. One guy who's not playing better, and I was hoping he would after getting some downtime, that's Anthony Richardson. It pains me to say it. He was on the sit list last week for all the same reasons he's on the sit list this week. This is a much better game environment. Obviously, playing CJ Stroud and the Texans is a lot better than, last week playing Miami and, Snoop Huntley and that offense. But man, that's about the only thing I think we can kind of hang our hats on this week with A-Rich is like, yeah, they're going to have to be up in pace. They're going to have to play more, play faster because, in theory, the Texans are probably going to be leading this game. It's just not good enough from Richardson as a passer, man. The design carries are nice, but it doesn't matter when you can't complete passes regularly. 54% of his passes last week against the Dolphins were charted as catchable by our charting team at Fantasy Points Data. Just 54%. That is absolutely wild. Basically, 1 out of every 2 passes, a little over 1 out of every 2 passes that he threw last week, were completely uncatchable. An unbelievable 30% of his targets this season have been charted as off target. Bo Nix is second worst at 22%. So A-Rich is 8% higher than the second worst guy, man. It's scary hours out here for Colts. It's really scary for Pittman and Downs. Those guys are easily on the sit list this week. We'll talk receivers in a little bit, but those 2 guys, man, there's just no catchable targets. This is a run-heavy offense. Jonathan Taylor is going to be back, so they should be even more run-heavy this week. Not a great matchup on that front. Houston's front seven's really good, but I'm sitting A-Rich, and I'm playing, Dak, Jared Goff, I think Tua in his first game is a little bit safer. Geno, for sure. Brock Purdy, I'll go right back to him after a bad week against Dallas. There's too many good pocket passer and quarterback plays this week where it's like, man, I'd much rather just like figure I can get 15 or 16 as opposed to Richardson, who right now, man, his floor is like 5 or 6 points right now, and that's all based on rushing because the passing has not been good. Miami just blitzed the pants off of him last week. They spent extra rushers like on 50% of his dropbacks. Richardson has a negative adjusted net yards per attempt against the blitz this season. The jury's out on him. Like until he can get in some semblance of rhythm and timing, like he's going to be on my sit list. And it's painful, y'all. Painful. All right, let's keep it moving to running backs. Definitely not a painful week at running back. It is a great week at the position. Twofold thing here. One, receivers just like completely airballed last week. Yeah, like we had more injuries that were just absolutely painful. But the whole entire receiver position airballed last week. Only 16 wide receivers scored 15 or more fantasy points last week. Typically, there's like 25 or 30, even on a week where there's buys. Like we could get up to 25 or 30 if it's a really high scoring week. Pitiful last week, especially with two teams out on bye. All that being said, between the injuries and everything, we have 30 running backs this week projected with 11 or more fantasy points. We only have 34 receivers with 11 or more PPR points, which is wild. I mean, in PPR, it really boosts up receivers because those receptions really add up. So second fold to that first fold, yeah, you're going to be playing running backs in your flex, I think, this week and for the next couple weeks, just because we're about to get some more buys and receivers just been cleaned out. So we don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about the best running back plays. We'll get started as we always do in the RB2 pile. The top this week is Javonte Williams. Hey, if you were patient and held out here, you are being rewarded with 2 awesome back-to-back spots. We liked Javonte a little bit last week against the Saints. Love him even more this week against the Panthers. Bryce Young is back in, and he's been inept in his 18 starts. Maybe we see a little bit of more confidence after 6 weeks off from Bryce, but I mean, this is just a smash spot for the Broncos. It's huge home favorites. Carolina's run defense. We've been targeting them, 2 years now? They're giving up a league high 133 rushing yards per game. My concern with Williams long-term remains that like this backfield turns into some sort of 3-way committee, but for now, he's playing well enough to keep the job. 60% of the snaps in 4 straight games. I think he's getting safer by the week. Had his best game of the season last week, and this spot, like I said, is probably even better. Kareem Hunt, borderlining on must start. I put him in must start this week, in fact. I mean, they're just huge favorites against the Raiders, massive favorites. Hunt has all the touchdown equity. He's outsnapped Samaje Perine by 6-1 margin inside the 20. So he's a fraction of the player he once was coming out of college in terms of talent, but he's getting all the, extremely valuable touches. He's a borderline RB1. Ken Walker is a little bit lower in projections this week just because he had a slightly smaller snap share last week, but he still must start, as is Josh Jacobs, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, Chuba Hubbard, James Cook. All those guys are the best RB2 plays on the slate, followed by David Montgomery, Brian Robinson, and Chase Brown. And then that's when you kind of have to start squinting. Rachaad White is going to come up in projections by quite a bit. Bucky Irving is out. Definitely makes Sean Tucker a little bit interesting if you've been sitting on him for a few weeks. I think we know what White is at this point. Like, really good receiver, really good in the pass game, great after the catch, very mid runner. And Sean Tucker will probably get the early down stuff. We'll see Rachaad White mix in near the goal line, but Bucky Irving outsnapped White 5-2 inside the 10 last week. So if they want to give Sean Tucker some goal line stuff, they certainly could. I think I mentioned Brian Robinson a second ago, but you're pretty much sticking him in the lineups as an RB2. Like we said, and then it gets kind of thin. Rico Dowdle, I think, is the one guy I'm having the biggest problem with this week getting there on. His role really came up, and I was starting to get pretty excited about him until week 6 happened. Obviously, they got trucked. But, yeah, man, I mean, Zeke took 8 carries. Dowdle only had 5. He is getting all the passing down work. It would make sense for them to bump Dowdle's role coming out of the bye. but he and Alexander Mattison are the two RB2s that I'm having the most trouble with at this point. Madison, it's not because of the role. Like, I'm a little more concerned about Dowdle's role, right? Mattison, like, he is fully taken over this job. His snaps have come up in every single game over the last month. Season high 72% last week. Zamir White is just a non-factor in this backfield. Madison's better. Horrible matchup. I mean, the Chiefs are just absolutely stonewalling opposing run games. Jordan Mason had 58 yards against them last week, and that was a season high against Kansas City. It's incredible what they're doing. Typically what we see is, like, when you have a defense that plays a lot of too high coverage, you'll see typically opposing offenses want to try to run the ball a little bit more because you're just taking one guy out of the box, right? And it's amazing that Kansas City is just like, they're not giving up anything. Raiders are huge dogs, 10-point underdogs. So Madison, Dowdle, and I think Travis Etienne are the three guys I'm sitting this week out of this RB2 pile. I think Bigsby's just playing better than Etienne. This is headed towards some sort of compartmentalized split where Bigsby is the early down guy and Etienne gets all the passing down stuff. But yeah, running backs and hamstring injuries typically don't mix. I am out on the Etienne business this week. Let's try to have a better week at receiver. I think everybody got pretty much everything wrong outside of the top 15 receivers last week. You look at the top scorers, it's like, yep. There's the Bengals guys. There's A.J. Brown. Oh, Terry McLaurin had a decent game without, Jayden Daniels. There's Justin Jefferson. There's Amon-Ra. And then from there, like I said, it was just a complete failure at the position. Let's go through what I think are some of the best receiver 2 plays of this week. We'll get started with just a matchup that I can't stop picking on. Like, you guys could yell at me, scream at me, try to mute me for stopping to talk about the Jags' awful secondary, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not. Tyson Campbell's back. Doesn't matter. I'm playing Romeo Doubs this week, man. He's a really, really important player for this Packers offense, and I'm buying him. Actually, I'm buying low on Doubs here. He's kind of having a sneaky breakout season, and no one wants to talk about it. Everybody wants it to be Jayden Reed, or they want it to be Dontavian Wicks or Christian Watson, and I think what's kind of staring at us all in the face here is Doubs. He leads the team in first read target share in the 4 games that they've had all their guys together. That's Reed, Wicks, Watson, and Doubs. Leads the team in first read target share at 26%. Jayden Reed's at 20. Wicks is at 17. Watson is at 9. He also leads the team in routes. Kind of important. He's their outside wide receiver. And he leads the team in yards per route run in those 4 games. 2.5 yards per route run. That's nothing to turn your nose up, man. Really, really good stuff from Doubs this season. Jacksonville is just getting hammered. League high 125 yards per game to opposing outside wide receivers. I really like Doubs as a wide receiver too, and I'm buying. I'm buying some Doubs. I think he has the most consistent role in this offense, just in terms of, like, we can predict him to be on the field and getting targets every week. Jayden Reed's role has been a little up and down. He's still the best player here by far. The most valuable receiver here by far is Jayden Reed. And Jordan Love's just playing so well. Leads the league in, yards per game, leads the league in touchdown rate. I just think there's enough here for Doubs to have a pretty nice role. And what a turnaround, man. We were a couple weeks ago, he's sitting on the bench suspended. 2 rookie receivers that I am buying this week for different reasons. One, like Xavier Worthy last week, we were so close to being right. Go back, rewatch the game if you didn't see it. Mahomes missed him for a walk-in 69-yard touchdown. Worthy got behind the defense, and you continue to see the way defenses play Worthy, man. They're scared as hell of this guy. Like, yeah, okay, he gets pushed over a couple times in press coverage, but, like, watch how the defense dictates coverage his way. Like, they are scared to get beat deep. Mahomes isn't playing that well. We've been on this for a while now. He's been a sit player for a couple weeks in fantasy football, really, since they lost Rice. Mahomes has been a sit player, but I'm back in on Worthy. I'm buying low. I thought his usage out of the bye was super positive, led the team in targets, led them in first reads at 35% over Travis Kelce. 35% first read target share is like what Rashee Rice was doing. I know they added DeAndre Swift. I think they're going to play him out of the slot, which is really interesting. That's what Reed said today. They're going to kind of use Hopkins as a big slot. That just makes me want to buy more Xavier Worthy. We could anything to dictate coverage away from this guy, because Justin Watson, no offense, he's not going to get it done. Travis Kelce is not the same player that he once was. Like, he's still really good underneath. He still has the mind meld with Mahomes, but he's just not the same player after the catch that he once was. I'm buying Worthy, and I'm buying even with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins. Rest of season, Marvin Harrison's outlook is really scary. Kyler Murray's just not playing well enough, y'all, like at all. He has the one good game against a terrible Rams defense, but he has been under 6.7 yards per pass attempt in 6 of 7 games. I mean, the Mendoza line in the NFL is 7 yards per pass attempt. Murray's been well below that. He's averaging 190 passing yards per game. Easily a career low for Kyle. I think it's equal parts like he's not playing all that well, and it's equal parts that they could just be doing things much easier with this offense. I was looking in the data suite doing some research for the show, and Marvin Harrison has 2 design targets all year. Design target, it's like just a screen. Give him a screen on the outside. Why aren't we using this guy like Jamar Chase? Give him a couple screens every single week. Let's see what he can do after the catch. He has 2 designed screen targets all season through 7 games. That's pitiful. So yeah, sure. Kyler's not playing well. There's just some easy fixes here. Let's get him some easy throws to a guy who's great after the catch. Schematically, this is an awesome matchup for Marvin. Last week was not. I noted that in start sit that the Chargers play a ton of 2 high coverage. They did again last week. This week, Miami they're interesting. Last 2 games, they've switched it up. They played a ton of 1 high coverage, 1 high safety coverage. In week 5, they played a ton of man in week 5. Then in week 7 last week, like we just talked about, they just blitzed the crap out of Anthony Richardson, played a ton of cover 3 behind it. If they play more cover 1 and we get some one-on-one coverage on the outside for Marv, this is a good spot. He's averaging 2.8 yards per route run and has earned 30% of the first 3 targets against single high coverage this season. That dips considerably against 2 high, sub 1 yards per route run against 2 high. Nearly 3 yards per route run against 1 high. So I think this is a Marv week. Obviously, we got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane on the other side to speed up this game and kind of give us a good game environment for lots of points to be scored. So I'm buying on Marv this week, but I'm telling you, I'm not super stoked for the rest of the season. Hey, we got to be stoked though about Jameis Winston, right? Like, we finally have a chance at some competent quarterback play. Boy, were we right about David Njoku last week. Got spammed underneath targets by DTR. Then he got the touchdown on the final drive with Winston. Njoku's just a must start. We were right about that buy low. I'm kind of buying into this rest of this passing offense though too. I'm in on Cedric Tillmon first, and then I'm also a little Jeudy curious. Just a little Jeudy curious. Now, not nothing too crazy. Like I said, I think Winston, his skill set meshes a little better with Cedric Tillmon. Tillman's like an actual vertical receiver, was pretty good at Tennessee. Like, they've had some weird receivers come out. Obviously, Jalen Hyatt's been a mega bust. Cedric Tillman's not like that. He's actually a pretty good receiver. Last week, led the team in first read target share. Co-led the team in first read target share with David Njoku. Tillman had 31% of the first reads, as did Njoku. New career high in targets. He had 12. Really nice game, 8 for 81 receiving. And this is an awesome matchup. I mean, the Jags have been at the top of the list all year of the secondary that we're targeting the most. Ravens are right there behind them, giving up the second most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game above average to opposing wide receivers at 9 points per game. By the way, we had a couple comments last week. You can check out all the schedule adjusted metrics that our guy Scott Barrett is the mastermind behind. If you click on the research tab, scroll down, click schedule adjusted points allowed. It's on the main fantasy point site, not in the data suite. We'll get that in the data suite in next season. But yeah, fantasy point subscribers have that access. Real quickly, 2 receivers that I'm out on this week. Again, it's a rough week for receivers. So like, if you have to play these 2 guys, trust me, I don't blame you, but I'm not excited at all to play them. And it really doesn't do, it doesn't have anything to do with their talent. It's just about their quarterbacks. Chris Olave will be back this week. He practiced in full, just got a notification. He should be back from the concussion. Spencer Rattler is not it. It's been bad without Derek Carr. It's not just like the bad efficiency, 5.5 yards per pass attempt. He's taken 11 sacks, 5 sacks in the first start, 6 sacks in the second. those are just drive killers. They're just they're just killing the Saints drives. Their scoring rate is way down. They've scored on just 23% of their possessions over the last 2 weeks. Carr and that offense was at like 50%. And then, oh, by the way, we were just talking about the Chargers. This is a horrible matchup. They don't have great cornerback talent, but by scheme, it's kind of like what the Bills do. And they just play a ton of too high. They play it 60% of the time. They keep everything in front of them. And it's limiting opposing outside wide receivers to the 7th fewest yards per game at 74. The Jets are right there. They're the 6th fewest yards per game to opposing outside wide receivers at 73. They have DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, and they place a lot of, one high. So listen, Chargers kind of sneakishly being slept on, I think, defensively, and they're going to get Joey Bosa back, it looks like, this week. I'm out on the Olave this week. I'm also out on Deontay Johnson. Again, it's just Bryce Young, 18 career starts. Young is averaging 173 passing yards per game, 5.4 yards per pass attempt. He has 12 total touchdowns, just 19. He's got 19 turnovers. He was so bad in weeks 1 through 2. Bottom of the league in completion rate under expectation at negative 12%. And this is a horrific matchup. You wish if you could, obviously, Andy Dalton got into a car accident. We hope he's okay. And he sprained his thumb, but you really don't want Bryce Young playing against this Broncos defense. Pat Surtain is going to be back this week to shadow Deontay, probably going to try to erase him from the game, and they're just going to blitz Bryce Young into oblivion in this game. Denver is blitzing nearly 40% of opposing quarterback dropbacks. This is the second highest rate in the league, only behind Minnesota. Chuba, I think, is really the only guy in play for the Panthers this week. All right, we're going to close it out with some tight ends. It's not a great week at tight end. We've had way worse this season. Way worse. At the top of the board, we were just mentioning David Njoku is a must start. Buy low still if you can. George Kittle, Brock Bowers must start. Then from there, I think Trey McBride doesn't project as well this week. It's not a terrific matchup for him, but he's a must start player, as is Jake Ferguson. From there, it's the mid-range tight end pool, right? One guy I've been trying to buy low and trade for this week in some of my leagues is Cade Otton. Especially in leagues where I need some tight end help. On's role was already kind of decent. He's not a great player after the catch. He's not some explosive playmaker, but he gets open relatively often. He earns targets. His role was decent, like we said. Last 5 games, he's tied with George Kittle and Jake Ferguson for the 4th most tight end targets per game at 7. And last week, without, listen, I almost threw up in my mouth a little bit talking about the Bucs, or writing about the Bucs this week without my guy Godwin. But without Godwin, last week, Cade Otton led the team in first read target share at 24%. I think he's the biggest beneficiary of Godwin's absence just over the long haul. And then obviously Mike Evans' injury just kind of further solidifies the volume here. He projects amazing. He's our tight end 4 behind Bowers, Kittle, and Njoku. Feel amazing about that. 2 tight ends I'm a little bit lower on this week. We liked Mark Andrews last week. Nailed that one. Got 2 touchdowns. That was great. It's great to see him among the living, not absolutely dead, but the involvement is still not good enough. It's not smoke and mirrors because he's still a really good player, as we saw last week, but we got to see more participation, man. We got to see the routes come up. Andrews has been at a 50% route participation rate over the last 3 weeks with 11 catches for 162 yards and 3 touchdowns in that span. He's still behind Isaiah Likely, who's at nearly 60% route participation. It's not close to where it needs to be a consistent fantasy asset. So I'm still kind of raising the alarm bells here with Andrews long term. And, last week it was just such a good matchup against the Bucs. That game had potential to go off. Man, Ravens might absolutely dust the Browns here, even though I'm kind of into Jameis and this offense again. It's also a horrible matchup. Browns have, once again, done really, really well against opposing tight ends. They just have a really athletic linebacking and safety group, giving up the 6th fewest yards per game and the 2nd fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed below average to the position at -5. Yeah, so sitting Andrews, obviously sitting Likely in that same vein. I'm sitting Dalton Schultz. I've been just streaming this guy, praying for some production. He's not finished higher than the tight end 19 in any game this season. He's just not been earning targets. 12.5% first read target share over the last 2 weeks. Without Nico Collins, Dell and Diggs are getting all of the first read, all of the targets there for the Texans. I do like Cole Kmet a little bit more just because we're into Caleb Williams this week. Hunter Henry's a decent streamer, as is Jonnu Smith. One player I have no idea what to do with this week, and I'll just admit it, is Sam LaPorta. Jameson Williams is out with a suspension, but like LaPorta's first 3 target share is below Noah Gray. LaPorta has 8% of the Lions' first 3 targets. He's behind the Chiefs' second tight end in first 3 target share, Noah Gray, at 9%. Ben Johnson and Jared Goff especially have been in their bags. Goff is playing at an extremely high level. My lean, man, is LaPorta doesn't project well. He's the tight end 15 in our projections. My lean, though, is if you have him, you probably just got to play him again. This is, we're taking a big slice out of the offense with Jameson Williams, who's seeing way more first reads than LaPorta. It might just be the Amon-Ra show again, though, and it honestly might just be the back show again, though, because the Lions are 11-point favorites against the Titans. It's not a good matchup for LaPorta. He is a super, super tricky call. He's not going to project well, but if you've been riding it for the last couple of weeks, this next 2-week stretch, if we don't get him back involved in this offense, like it's pretty much over for his fantasy season, unfortunately, after having such a good year last year. All right, y'all, that is going to do it. Week 8, I hope you guys crush. You will, armed with all of this information over at Fantasy Points. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you think I'm wrong or if you think I'm right, leave a comment down below. Make sure you're checking out the Sunday morning show with myself, John Hansen, and Tom Brawley. We go through all of your start-sit questions, chat with you guys on Sunday mornings, go through inactives, and have a good time. So make sure you're checking that out. And till then, see you guys at the top of the leaderboards. Good luck.